If you've tried therapy, you've read books, maybe you've even tried medication, but you're still not feeling okay, I want you to hear this really clearly. You're not broken. The truth is, mental health outcomes haven't improved in over 50 years, and that's nothing to do with you. It's because the system often treats people like categories and not humans, offering quick fixes rather than getting to the root cause to make real change. I'm joined by Dr. Dobud, a social worker, researcher, and educator who's worked with families and adolescents all over the world. And this conversation looks at why the mental health system can leave good people stuck and what you can do to change that. I'm Nick Brax, and this is Move Your Mind, where we help you change your life by changing your mind. And if you look fine on the outside, but you feel lost on the inside, you're in the right place. This episode will help you change your life by changing your relationship with mental health, so you can take ownership of it and move forward today.
Mental health outcomes have not improved in over 50 years. So it's like we keep reinventing something and we're really missing the point. We can always outsource everything to experts. And so that's the same when we want to help anybody. We have too many of these passive interventions that treat people as just their category. Like, I'm going to create this program that's going to solve ADHD, or this pill will solve depression. You have to treat young people as crew, not as passengers. And the numbers just keep going the opposite way. You know, we have so much antidepressant use, it's in water runoff and the fish we eat. We've had a shortage of stimulants in Australia for the whole year because we're prescribing this stuff so much. And I'm not anti-medication at all, but we have to get serious about, okay, you've got the medication, now what?
I got into mental health awareness 15 years ago, and it was barely talked about. It was taboo to speak about it. And I think it's amazing how far we've come. Everyone's talking about it now. But I think that has, in some ways, set us backwards because we're not just taking action. And we can have, we do have all the information we could ever need, but unless you can learn critical thinking and how to take personal accountability for yourself, then you're not going to really make any change. You're not going to know what to do with that information. So that's what we need to learn, because there's no right or wrong way to go about it. And I think what you're talking about there, I think it's so important.
And we see this with the whole social media bans movement. It's a passive intervention that's going to be prescribed to 100% of kids. And we're not going to like when this doesn't work. What is going to solve something is if young people have a world worth participating. And what they're telling us is they're disengaged, they're frustrated. And what we're doing as the adults is just continuing to label, categorize, diagnose, therapize. I mean, young people have so much therapy speak these days. And a lot of that's good for raising awareness and raising access to things. But I was left asking, access to what? Like, is it better than it was, or is it just the same shit dressed up a little bit of a different way? And so for parents, I thought, parents sign over a ton of power when they seek mental health treatment for their kid. They don't know, is my child going to be medicated? What diagnosis are they going to have? Do I want them to have a diagnosis on their medical chart? All of this is really complicated stuff. So we thought, if we could write with only public interest in mind, information parents will probably want to know so they can make the informed decision for their family. But what was so clear to us, and we found like UNICEF research about this, attempts to fix teenagers are almost always going to fail. We have to bring them in as crew, as active in the intervention, active participants, treat them as resources. And then something something can hopefully come of it. So we have this notion of, as you were saying, like at the end of the day, the change is all going to come from inside the person. They have to do it. That's why, like when I'm teaching social work, I always say, don't worry about thank you notes. Like, when your client sends you thank you notes, it's bizarre. It probably means they felt like they had to. Right. And of course, there's people who go, you're amazing, and they do it anyway. But instead, if you can work with someone so that change journey is theirs, that's amazing. So, and there's amazing research talking about this stuff that, like, really, how do we help people own their journey so that we don't take away from the hard work they put in? So it's one thing to come to therapy once a week or take your medication every day or go to residential treatment center for a longer period of time, if it sticks, we want to start looking at how did that person do that? That's incredible. Not putting all the onus on Planet Mental Health and all these interventions and all these different things that we see going on. So I don't know. When it comes to writing, it was really interesting to go, let's not tell people what to do. Let's give them a lot of information and see what they can do with it. And I think that's why it's kind of like youth mental health for adults. That let's actually get real about this stuff, because there's a lot of simple things we can do to make big changes. And we could start with school and the phones, but like once the phones are gone, what are the adults going to do then? Well, then we have to talk.
Yeah.
Well, let's just start talking to them now and not wait for the government to solve this problem, because it's not going to happen.
We'll be waiting a long time. The government, in Australia, I guess it's like so much money put into reactive services, which are important, but nowhere near enough with preventative.
Well, like if you take Australia, for instance, like this is not funny, haha, but it makes me go, oh my gosh. Like the book, The Anxious Generation, comes out April last year. By November, we have a social media ban for young people under 16. Again, feels right. We're all see kids glued to their phones. We're all glued to the phones. It feels like the right thing. We see this huge movement in phone-free schools, right? An article came out that in Broken Hill, a mining company, they have to do reports of lead in the children around this mine. So 5 years ago, they found the concentration levels of lead in indigenous children's blood was elevated in 75% in this community, 50% of white kids in this community. And for 5 years, the government and all the environmental watchdogs covered it up. Didn't let it get leaked out to the media. They just buried the report. And so The Guardian releases this article. And I'm sitting there going, here's people like lead linked to crime, attention-related issues. All of, like, we know we banned lead in gasoline, lead in paint, because it's so toxic to our central nervous system, our neurological system. And so, but still, like, that's okay, but social media bad. I'm just like, the priorities are backwards here, guys. Like, and so I don't lose sleep about, like, we wrote about environmental toxins because it's fascinating that it gets boring. It feels like a tinfoil hat conversation. And social media, we think, once we do this, they'll stop poisoning us all. No. It's fascinating to me. So, like, with the book, we talked to all these experts and we looked at kind of what's the world we're all creating for kids. So the book, Kids These Days, is a funny pun on how we always blame the kids for everything. Like, when the kaleidoscope was invented in the early 1800s in England, people were reported to be so fascinated by the kaleidoscope, they walked into walls. Like, everybody had a kaleidoscope. And then it got like, it was like the first kind of smartphone, right? And everybody was like, oh, everyone's so distracted by the kaleidoscope, men are going to steal your wife. Like, these are cartoons from the 1800s. Like, we've done all this before, and we think, that generation is the weakest. Nope, the next one is the most disrespectful. Nope, the next one. And it's like, hey, the kids are probably okay, and we need to start looking at why they're okay and working with that. So I think it's ultimately kind of a funny book in the sense of, I mean, like, there's doom and gloom about mental health for sure, and there's doom and gloom about thinking that, our regulatory bodies are doing the right thing. At the same time, I think that a lot of the early feedback, it's been out just over a month. A lot of the early feedback is, I didn't think about something that way, and now I can think about it this way and do something about it. Because obviously, if we took the toxins thing seriously, which I do, but like, none of us would ever go out to a restaurant again. Like, you would have to say, hey, chef, where'd you get all this shit from? But so
exactly.
we got to just make our best choices for our kids. And that's what every parent is doing, and what every teacher is doing. Everyone's doing their best here. But sometimes we can get distracted by nonsense noise and the latest moral panic. And what's sensationalist today will be boring tomorrow. We'll laugh at, technology and like think about what an iPhone was 10 years ago. Like it's like this is not reversing. Like this is only moving forward at Mach speed, you know? Um,
Terrifying. Yeah, the speed.
yeah,
But yeah, the points are it's so important because we like to think that we're special, things are different now, etc. But if you really look at history, the same patterns over and over again in different ways just repeat themselves. And we're creatures of habit. We fall into those patterns. So it's like, well, social media is going to be there. Ban it all you want in a school, but then what happens? It's like, well, you're going to be exposed to it. Why do, in European countries when you're actually exposed to alcohol earlier on, there's less binge drinking? Ban it, it's probably going to go the other way. So why don't we accept that the world is far from perfect? It's never going to be perfect. It's always going to have drugs, social media, every temptation you can imagine. Okay, let's learn how to, again, comes back to how do we learn how to take control, make decisions ourselves that are, within all of that noise. Because if you want to create, otherwise, unless you want to have someone living in a box for their whole life, it's impossible.
Exactly. And you just have to make your best choice. And also, I guess it's something for parents. I always did this when working with families, is I'd say to parents, let's say this problem is gone, right? What are you going to do? And so, like, for instance, with the phones, and people always chuckle, like I've been on local ABC radio talking about the phone bans. And I always say, okay, so tomorrow elves come while we're asleep and they steal all smartphones. There's no more smartphones and they take away computers. What are all the teachers going to do the next day? Well, you're going to have to do exactly what you have to do today. So we're waiting for something to solve this. And I think, the phones are distracting. I get it. And social media is a nuisance. Sure. At the same time, that's why the kids need us. They need us to give them something to imitate. We need to put our phones down. So we need to turn this around, as you've been talking about responsibility. Like, how do we model healthy eating or exercise or the things we want our children to do? And so how do we model how to have a good debate? How do we disagree?
Yeah.
I hear this all the time. There's no disagreements in the school anymore. I go, I watch you all on social media and you go, none of you agree with anything. Like everyone's divisive and annoying. Like, let's actually come together as the adults. And then those polarizing, loud noise, that gets quieter. If we all come together, all that noise gets quieter. And
my God.
And I think that's sort of the political undertone of the book is like, let's stop waiting around for the left or the right to figure this out. We need to come together and we need to come together as adults and live in the messy middle of all of this. That, the example we use in the book, 1 glass of wine a day, really good for you. Then you just scroll down a little bit, no safe amount of alcohol is ever good for you. And you go, both of these things are probably true. Who the hell knows? Make up your own mind. Live your life the way that you need to make. You're not going to solve this with headlines and clickbait.
Oh my God. I think we could do a full podcast on this topic. It's never ending, but I couldn't agree more. And it's a recipe to, I guess, become overwhelmed and probably not stick to anything if you look at it like that, because anything you want to find, you will find. And really, I just think it boils back to common sense. Okay, how do I just have balance? How do I, there's no right or wrong. You should be allowed to indulge in certain things if you want to, but find balance, use your own judgment, and stop listening to all the garbage out there. And on the other end, that whole divide, I notice that so strongly when I come back to Australia, and people that have a view on one side writing off the people on the other side. And I can't stand that. I just wish we could... because we can learn a lot. We don't have to agree. And I've had to challenge myself on that. I've come from a political family in Australia, had very clear views that have, been drummed into me that I still at the core agree with. But I would find myself almost judging people that I'd meet that were on a different side of the political spectrum. And I started having to really think about that and listen to what they said. And a lot of the time I ended up learning a lot of things by connecting. And then you realize everyone at the core, pretty much everyone, is a good person. And why the hell should we not get on with people that have completely opposing views to us? Does that make them a bad person? It's like, what the hell?
Totally. And this is like, I think if you like some of the researchers, they try to correlate when social, like front facing cameras and social media to, you know, this was the spike in youth mental health. This is all this, right? I think you could do the exact same thing with 24-hour news. You know, I go home when I mean, I'm from Washington, D.C. Like everyone is like a politician around me, you know? And I turn on the news and I'm sitting there with my mom and I go, Mom, they're just fighting all the time. Like there's no news. Like it's just arguing. And then you can go to a different channel and they're arguing the exact opposite point of view, and no one's coming together. And so there was a book, and we were really stoked that Kurt Gray is a social psychologist, that he endorsed kids these days. He wrote a book, either came out earlier this year or late last year, called Outraged. And it's like, why does religion and politics divide us so much? And Kurt, he writes this really simple idea. Instead of fighting about why you're right and the other person's wrong, ask, what are you trying to protect? So for instance, you know, if you're getting in a fight about immigration with somebody, ask them what they're trying to protect, not like, why are you right or wrong? No matter what side you're on. And usually you'll all find common ground. By what you want to protect will usually bring you together. So, you know, so that's an interesting way to kind of build a bridge between such a divide, is stop arguing with each other and ask them what they want to protect, and you might get somewhere.
And I think so much of it is coming from the place of the same kind of thing. You know, I quit alcohol a while back, and what you notice very acutely is people get very threatened by it and try and question it, etc. And really what's happening is it might be highlighting to them something they're not wanting to address. So if they see something different happening, it makes them actually have to self-analyze and think about things. And I think we get on our moral high ground because that's our place of comfort. It gives us something to stand and sit on. But if we really have it challenged and think from other points of view, then we might lose a bit of that attachment. And that, you know, is letting go of that identity and feeling more vulnerable. And I think it really does just come down to vulnerability, all of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And being vulnerable, being, you know, I know we've all had this experience where how thrilling and rewarding is it to be the dumbest person in a room? Like you just sit there and go, I need to listen to these people. I went to a trauma and dissociation conference in New Zealand the weekend before. And I went with a great friend of mine. He's on the board of this association. I always joke with him. I go, this is like this stuff. It's like all mind voodoo. And we make fun of each other back and forth. And I went to this conference and I remember sitting at dinner with like the organizing committee, and we're all sitting there and I was like, no one here cares at all what I have to say, because they come from a totally different perspective of mental health. So it was actually really nice to be at a conference. Like I got to present some of my ideas, but to be at a conference and have no agenda was like amazing. Like great presentations, great speakers, bad workshops, good workshops, just like any conference. But I could just be a student again. I didn't have to learn anything. I didn't have to show what I have to say. You know, I could just be there and absorb. So sometimes a kind of a theme of our discussion, like that humble pie, I think is really good. Like,
oh my
really
God, it really is. Yeah. And that's what I love most about the podcast. Like I sit there and I try and not over prepare as well. I try and come into it and look at it like, how can I just want to learn myself. How can I learn? And I, you know, feel lucky to be able to sit with people like yourself, take so much out of it. But that's how we learn, you know. Let's take an interest in other people, because we're going to get, if anything, we're going to get way more out of it than just saying trying to like dominate the conversation and say what we think about everything and not listen to the other person. We're going to learn. We're going to grow.
100%.
Can you give a bit of a background just so they can understand, you know, the work you do and how you came to be, you know, living in Australia?
Yeah. So I guess a lot of my journey really kicks off at going to university. I didn't know what I wanted to study when I turned 18. I hated high school, so was a terrible student. And I went and I'm a pretty good musician, so I started doing some music theory classes at the local community college. didn't love that. Um, Started take as I was a volunteer firefighter right down the road from that community college. I took some fire science classes, and that was awful. Hated that. And then I took a psychology class, and I had been in and out of therapy like most of my childhood. I was a pretty naughty kid. I was diagnosed with ADHD, so I couldn't sit still. All these things that got me in trouble. And I was actually really fascinated by therapy. I couldn't tell you if therapy ever helped me, but it was the only time people actually had like real conversations with me. Like otherwise it was adults, I was in trouble. No one ever asked me like, hey, what do you think about these things and these ideas? And so I really loved the notion of therapy. I just thought none of these people are really the person to help me. And so took a psychology class and I was basically hooked. At that same time, I started working in residential care programs with youth, working at wilderness therapy programs. And I grew up going to summer camp like 8 weeks a year. So being outdoors was nothing new to me. Transitioned from psychology into a social work program at University of Maryland, Baltimore County, UMBC, right up the road. Um, and I was pretty hooked with social work. I helped to start an outpatient program and relapse prevention program for young people coming out of um, residential treatment programs. And so I basically lived on the couch with a clinical social worker and worked all the time. And I mean, it was a pretty amazing experience to go to university and start building a program. Um, so outdoor therapies was always my jam. It just made sense to me. I really liked it, and it brought me everywhere. Now, meeting the transition to Australia is an interesting story. I My mother finished breast cancer treatment in 2009, and that year she said, I want to take the boys to Alaska. So we went on a cruise in Alaska. And if you've ever watched like Deadliest Catch, like it can be pretty rough water there. Now, I am someone, seasickness doesn't even come on the radar for me. And so I had nothing to do. My mom was seasick, my brother was seasick, the whole boat was seasick. Like glasses were breaking and everything. And so I was just seated at a bar reading a book, and there was one other person there. And so that was my now wife, Renee. And we were the only two people on this boat that seemingly didn't get seasick. I went back home. We traded some information. And she called me one day and said, you should come visit Australia. I said, that would be nice if I had any money. Like, what part of living on the couch of my boss's house don't you understand? Or camping all the time or whatever. And my father, who had left our family when I was younger, his mother found a bank account our grandfather had that or something, and she mailed me a check for $7,000 that day. And I went, screw it. Let's go to Australia.
Meant to be. Yeah, wow.
Yeah. So I came to Australia for a week. That's all the university would let me go for. I think I told them I was asked to present at a conference or something, some story to get permission, and went to Australia. And I said, "Oh, this is a cool place. I can keep going there." So that was and then just back and forth to finish studying, and then came to Australia, worked at a bunch of nonprofits and working with youth. Started our own nonprofit in 2012, like I said, doing outdoor therapy stuff with teenagers and families. Got the research bug and the writing bug. So did a master's with a research project attached to that. That transitioned me into a PhD that I finished in 2020, and then wrote a few books and and some peer-reviewed stuff that nobody reads. And yeah, no, I love the balance of being able to read the research and then being able to test these ideas with people that you're working with and see how can we actually make therapy and mental health care just actually better mental health treatment outcomes have not improved in over 50 years. So it's like we keep reinventing something and we're really missing the point. So that's sort of how I got to Australia. I'm in Adelaide. I work for Charles Sturt University. That's in New South Wales. So I get to stay home, get to keep, I've got good flexibility with work and, have a great job. And love what I do, get to write whatever I want, and never get in trouble for that, seemingly. So it's been really good. So I go back and forth Australia and the States still, but I don't know. I like to think of myself as, not one or the other, just wherever my feet are on the ground, that's where I'm at.
Well, we have a lot in common, mate, and I love that story. That's an amazing story. It's it's like you sort of sometimes I think if we allow it to, life will present to us the path, and we might have other plans, but it's sort of these little clues along the way lead us to where we're meant to go, and and that continues. We don't know where, like you're saying. I think the world wants us to be identifying as one thing or the other, like you're talking about there. I feel the same where, all of these chain of events, led me down a path that I wouldn't have imagined going down. And it got me to a lot of the places I wanted to get to, but not in the way I thought. And people continually want you to categorize everything as, yeah, but what's your future plan? What's this? What's that? We don't know, like we need to just be able to embrace who we are, where we are right now, and be working towards something, but be open within that.
There's a great, I'm a huge, well, as an academic, it's no surprise that I'm a huge nerd, but I've been reading of lately a lot of old social work books, like from the early 1900s. And so Jane Addams is considered the mother of professional social work. And she has a book I don't think anyone's ever read, because I didn't hear about it until last year. It's called The Excellent Becomes the Permanent. And it's something that I've thought about, like as a good musician, I don't need to. I can go on YouTube for 1 second and find way better musicians. So the excellence is in the work. It's in the practicing and putting in the hours and things like I know when Nevin and I started writing this recent book, I was pretty tired and exhausted, and then I look back and go, oh, that was like what, 3.5, 4 years ago, and now it's done. And then and you just go, I could be bogged down, like, when will this be finished? When will we have a good book? When will we have this correct thing that we think is perfect? And it's also like, actually, the excellence is in the work, in the effort, in the discipline to write things and get it done. And so I love this idea, like, if you can get the pursuit into your daily life, then you don't have to worry about the end goal. You can just keep inching closer to something. And so that's one of the best things about, I think, meeting people like you, meeting other people, is it's inspiring to go, okay, we just got to put in the work and not worry about the destination, because we're going to mess up. It's going to be a step forward, a step back, anything. But if you can get the systems in place that, oh, I'm going to work on this at this time and actually iron it out, then it becomes the permanent. It becomes just part of your life. And then it's automatic. It's just what you do. It doesn't have to be, it's daunting at first, but then it doesn't have to feel as daunting when it becomes part of the routine.
Couldn't agree more. And, the results that do or don't come from it are a byproduct, and they're a bonus. That's not the reason you're doing it. And it's such a fine line to tread. And I found it was a huge liberation for me when maybe 10 years ago, I really came to that conclusion where I was like, okay, I've tried all these different things. I keep trying to do these business startups. I don't really know what I want to do, but I keep falling flat on my face because my sort of why for doing it wasn't strong enough. It was really rooted in, I want to get a result, make money, build status or whatever. When I was able to get clear on, I just want to make change in the area of mental health, raise awareness, help people do these different things, then you just draw it back to that. And, my example currently would be the podcast, where I'm up to episode 240 something. But the thing with that was, at the beginning, I loved doing it, and I was just putting them out. Didn't matter if I recorded it in a bloody, under a doona at home. But I fluctuated. Even recently, I had to really ground myself again, where I found my mind looking at Stephen Bartlett, all these, huge podcasters that are doing it in a studio, millions of listeners, they're making all this money, getting huge celebrities on it. And I thought, hang on, why am I not doing it on that level? As soon as I started thinking like that, it actually stalled me from like taking the steps to keep progressing at just my own, level that I'm at. And it's kind of, it's just so fascinating how we we can want something so badly, but wanting it badly in the wrong way can prevent us from actually getting there.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really important point. And in like we all have to have money. I get that part. And then, but when we see the when we're looking only at the end goal, we'll be miserable the whole time, the entire journey, instead of being in it that like, oh my gosh, I need to really grassroots this thing and be have our boots on the ground in meeting people, talking to people. As a petty, musician, I remember we, recorded this record back in DC, and we thought, this is it. This is going to be amazing. And it's every now and then I'll go on a nostalgic and listen to it, and it didn't do what we wanted it to do, this and that. And I look back going, the hell, that was really fun. Like, it was fun driving to Pittsburgh and playing for two people, and then driving back to DC so I could go to an exam, and then driving up to New York and being a punk band playing at a country bar. Like, it's wild stories that it didn't do what it was supposed to, but it still was such an amazing, fun process to do. And one of my biggest takeaways from that is, you have a show in your hometown, and you invite all your friends, and then your first show, you got 100 people in a dive bar, and you're like, this is amazing. And then they don't want to come to the next show because your friends are not your business, So I always think that when it comes to, we're, going to talk about a book that I wrote, and promoting those things, like, nobody cares about that. So you need to keep putting stuff out there so that you keep meeting new people and get new people to the show. And that takes sometimes recording a podcast that nobody listens to, or playing a show that no one comes to. And then by the end of it, when it works out, you can go, wow, I really had some tenacity to keep going with this, and to keep pursuing these things. I mean, one of the things, and this is, I guess, to segue into mental health, we did this at our small nonprofit, and it was kind of a funny process. I learned from a psychologist in Fremantle, Dr. Daryl Chow. He's a legend. And if you are a therapist, Daryl Chow's Substack is incredible. You get a Friday mail, something to your mailing list on a Friday in your inbox, and it's awesome stuff about how we can all become better therapists. And one thing we did is we got together on Monday mornings as a team. And so we'd have a lot of social worker psychology students working with us as well. And we'd sit at our dining room table. So like our core staff of like 3 to 5 people at any time, and then maybe 3 to 5 students working with us. And we'd talk about, what are we all doing here? What's our goal? And someone would have to say from the heart, not like read our mission statement, but like, what are we going to do? Okay, we're going to be the best freaking youth service in the world. Okay, now what are we going to do? Well, for me, as the boss, I would say, I'm going to return emails to anxious parents or phone calls faster than I did last week. Like, just because I don't want to, or I'm tired, they're also worried about their children. So I need to return calls more quick. So I do little things like that just to try and push myself. And then at the end of the week, we'd get together. So this is Friday afternoon. We buy food and drinks, and we'd sit down and go, who messed up the worst this week? What we do wrong? What do we need to do better? And we just had to actually, like, we were really focused on our errors. And the funny thing is, when you had the right team around you, no one was scared of being bad, because being bad and recognizing it is how you get better. So we knew our strengths. We knew who we are. We supported each other. But we also came in and said, like, I didn't read my case notes before my next session. And then I said, how was your soccer game? And the kid said, well, I play basketball. And it's like tiny, but you got to catch those things so that you keeps you with a dose of humble pie. And the good thing of humble pie, then you got to put the work in. Where if we're just walking around thinking we're the best, then there's nothing for you to do. There's no growth. So staying with that beginner's mindset, I think can be really motivating just to keep going with things.
So important. No, but I love these points you're making. For anyone who doesn't have that structure around them that's listening to this, how can you create that incentive to be self-critical, to learn from errors, to try and improve? Because sometimes you could be in a situation where you've only got people that are telling you what you want to hear. I know I've been in that position for, most of my 20s, really. I just only allowed people, you have an echo chamber, and we see this on social media. How do you create that if you don't have that in your life? If you're listening to this and you want to make a change in your life, but you don't know where to begin, I've created a free Move Your Mind masterclass that walks you through how to build sustainable habits and make change that really sticks. And you'll also get access to a free weekly newsletter where I post practical tools and stories that I don't share anywhere else. To watch the free masterclass, head to go.nickbrax.com/moveyourmind. That's go.nickbrax.com/moveyourmind. You can also find the link in the show notes.
I think you have to be somebody who gives to other people as well. So for instance, in the therapy world, I see this all the time where you meet somebody and you go, I really look up to that person. I'd like to, learn more from them. And then they charge you an exorbitant amount of money for consultations. But they're not, like, I would not pay for supervision from someone who I know I can't call and get 5 minutes from. And so I want someone who's also in the weeds with me, like a good sports coach. They're only interested in my development, not how smart they are. They want me to get better at something. So if you can give that to other people, I think other people will give that back to you. I think the other thing, and this is like a Zen, a Zen kind of saying, like, it's easy when everything is working out to focus on how good we are at anything. And so we get sort of expert-itis, where it's like everything we're doing is working. Isn't this great? And then we miss out on the things we can still get better at. So in the therapy literature, the longest longitudinal study of individual therapist outcomes, the average therapist actually tends to decline the longer they work. So we don't always get better with experience. You get better with experience when you're really critical about your experience. So for instance, when you survey therapists, they will all say, and this, I don't mean to be a therapist. I find this stuff liberating and exciting because it means it challenges us to get better. So
Totally.
like, you survey therapists and they'll say, my clients are my best teacher. I've been doing this for X number of years. And there's a study where they how do you know your clients are the best teacher? And they'll say, well, I get feedback from them. And so these researchers recorded like thousands of hours of therapists working, and they could not find when they asked for feedback. So a lot of sessions end with like, how was everything today? And then someone goes, fine. And so I think you really need a systematic way to get that feedback on board. So things like, I could do that session over again. What would you have me do differently? Was there anything that was too hot or too cold? Like, get really specific and in the weeds, and then that's where you can get challenged. And then you need someone like another way. And I think this is like one of the funniest things. From about 2015, I video recorded every session with every client that consented to it, of course. And I will tell you, as someone who thinks I'm pretty good at engaging with young people, if you want to hate yourself, just watch yourself work, And I know you have this experience too in your work. Like, it is brutal. And so, but you can't watch yourself because you're going to be your toughest critic. Show somebody else your work. So get someone that'll watch you work for 10 minutes and go, have you just thought about, like, you're a bit jittery, Will. Like that might be unnerving to somebody else. See if you can regulate yourself a bit more before this. I go, okay, I can work on that. You know? So there's little tiny things that we can take away when we build a community of people around us that are all invested in getting better, not invested in, I'm right, they're wrong, and that sort of stuff. So I think I guess that's sort of what I love communities of therapists, because I can be around people that can challenge me, but do it with kindness, and that we can push ourselves to get better.
Totally, totally. And I think, like you're saying there, if we're getting results, but we're not observing where we can improve, we can just get comfortable with that status quo. But it is, like you're saying, watching back, it's kind of brutal because you can see where you can improve, showing that to other people to get feedback in a non-biased way. They can really give you the feedback. And I think it forces you then to, not look at how do I go through the motions and just, service what I'm doing? How do I become a pro at this? How do I, treat it like being an elite athlete? They're not going to rest on their laurels and, skip training sessions and just turn up and compete just so they can, come sort of mid place in a race. They're going to look at how do I optimize every single part of it. And I think because it's not as tangible a lot of the time in whatever career we're in, we don't do that. And we should be doing that. We should be doing it in not just our career, in how we show up in relationships, in all these areas of life. And it's tough, it's hard to do. I've been on a journey of doing that more recent times in relationships and how I show up on that level. And it can be really confronting, and you can learn things about yourself that your ego doesn't want to accept. But
no kidding. Yeah.
Oh, my girlfriend would get on with you. She's a neuroscientist, just finished her master's. She's going to do a PhD. But dating a neuroscientist who's studying psychology and, observing everything, she calls me out on everything. And sometimes I want to put my head through this brick wall here. Yeah. But then you reflect on it and you become so grateful for that feedback. So it's, there's no growth without pain.
Well, and, this is an amazing thing about relationships and people. If you don't have feedback early on in a process, it grows. And then it feels like so much, I've got to fix everything about myself. But if you lean into it early, it'll be little things. So then little things are easier to fix. So that's like in the therapy room, like I'll start from the second I meet a young person with, listen, I know there's pieces of paper on the wall. That doesn't mean anything. I'm just interested in not wasting your time and this being useful. So if we're on the wrong track, please call it out right away, because I don't want to go down this for 3 weeks and then realize it's going nowhere. So I really want it early on. So negative feedback early on is really helpful, but it's really hard. It's why whenever someone goes on like a blind date and they go, no, there's no feedback because no one's invested in anything yet. Where if you've been together with someone for a longer time, there's more arguments, there's more fighting, there's more getting frustrated with each other, there's more, I don't like the way that person breathes, and these really silly things that we get annoyed at, And so, but that's all because you're really invested in something. That means you really love someone to be engaged in that process. The worst thing is having no motivation to give or receive feedback from another person, because it means you really don't give a shit, right? I don't even want to give it because what's the point, But in the therapy room, it can be, we can get anxiety by thinking, get our nerves up by going, what are they going to say when I ask for feedback? But if you start at session 1, therapy is just two people figuring out what the hell the other person wants anyway. So if you can get a bit more of what the client wants. So there's actually really great research about this, that when therapists from the first session use a therapeutic alliance measure at the end of their sessions, those that have gotten the lowest rating at the start of therapy, this is the client saying there's issues with our relationship early on, and then have high ratings at the end of therapy, get the best outcomes. So just high ratings is not as good as getting a low rating early on. And so the argument is not that some clients don't have negative feedback to give. The actual thing is that therapist created a safe place where that client could say, I think we should work on other things, or I think you're going too fast or too slow, or I don't want to talk about my relationship with my mother, or any of these things. So getting the negative feedback early gives us the chance to work on ourselves. And then it's not something that 5 years down the road, you realize there was this thing that annoyed your partner or your friend from the start of that relationship that you didn't work on because they didn't feel comfortable telling you. So humans, notoriously poor at giving feedback, also not that great at asking for it. So I think that's something we can work on with those that we really care about fixing the relationship, where if therapy's over and then the client goes, I think you were an idiot for 6 weeks, what's the point of that feedback? There's nothing you can do about it. So we want it in real time, then we can fix it.
Yeah, and I guess so it's looking at it as well of making these choices as early as you can, because the further down a path you go, if you're stuck in a negative situation, you've got you've got lots of different negatives. It's so overwhelming often to try and change them, and you often don't make any changes because you can't stick to it. And it's, I guess like the more tangible example I often use is if someone has never stuck to an exercise routine, their diet's out of place, they don't sleep properly, they drink, they do all these different things. To them, making even one tweak to that just seems so overwhelming. Where do I begin? I've got a career, a family, this, that, the other. And they look at it almost too extreme. Unless I can change all of this overnight, I'm not going to do it. Whereas it comes down to these micro habits. Okay, let's isolate. How do you maybe just get your body moving 3 times a week for 10 minutes? And just do that for 3 months, for 6 months, then tweak one other thing. And before you know it, you start making these bigger changes. But it's so hard, I think, when you're coming from that place of having all of these obstacles against you. We can often overwhelm ourselves to the point where we don't stick to anything, and then that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that, oh no, when I try and change it, I can't, and then it becomes even more overwhelming, and you can get so stuck down that rabbit hole of not being able to, you're paralyzed in not being able to make change.
Yeah, analysis paralysis. And
Yeah.
Nevin and I, my co-author, when we wrote this book, we had parents in mind, but we didn't want to write a parenting book because there's too many of them, and there's too many 7 rules, new habits, 10 tools, like all these, prescriptions and lists and checklists. And what happens for a lot of people is they'll read something like that, like especially we cited this research in the first chapter of Kids These Days, and we talked about how new parents, when they buy the latest How to Get Your Child to Sleep book, they'll read it, and then when that doesn't work, they'll feel demoralized, and then it's like, that didn't, well, the person who wrote that book has never met your child, so we wrote in a way to say, here's a lot of information, too much information, but this is so you can make an informed decision. You can make an informed decision about medicating, about diagnosis, about, all the things that work as well as or better than medication, how to get more sleep, more exercise, go outside, go to dance class, do something social as often as you can. And so then you can make up your mind, your life. I don't want to tell you what to do. And so, but that's a really important one. So in the last chapter of the book, we talk about how the simple can be elegant. And I think there's a Canadian men's mental health network or society, and their motto is don't change much. And so little things tend to snowball into big things. So even if you're someone who's, thinking about cutting back drinking or any substance use, when you want your first drink, just wait 30 minutes for a second and just hold up for a sec and see what that 30 minutes are like. And if it needs to be sooner, wait 10 minutes, because it just gives you a tiny sense of agency to work on building that building that up, instead of going, I need to stop this and never do this ever again. Eventually, we know, like, even with cigarettes, like, how many times, someone quits and then they, go back into smoking cigarettes and they go, I'm a failure, this and that. It's like, no, actually, you quitting once is a pretty good predictor of you quitting later. So it takes you multiple times to get used to this stuff. So anytime you can change little things, it'll change the way you notice what's going on. So even though we talked about, like, being in a relationship, like, sometimes I remember Renee and I were having an argument about something, and we were sitting on the couch next to each other, and I was thinking, like, oh, this is so awkward. There's an elephant in the room. I don't even remember what the argument was about. And I was like, oh my gosh, should we talk about this? Would that ruin the night? What's going to happen next? What are we doing here? Do we need to? And I was sitting there like, why am I ruining sitting next to the couch with my best friend? Like, this moment is actually fantastic. Like, we can fight later. And I just looked at her and I was like, this is awesome. And she's like, why are you such a weirdo? And I was like, I just love sitting on the couch and watching crappy TV with you. It's like so nice to be around you. But all I was noticing was the fight, instead of noticing there's also a lot of good things outside of this argument that are really okay. And so I think that it's also what we notice. So if you can make tiny changes, it'll shift your thinking in probably a really big way.
Yeah, because we rob ourselves of enjoying the moment because we can be overcomplicating everything, thinking, like the example you've said there, I've had so many times. I mean, I found it heartbreaking one time with my partner where, because I tend to be thinking, projecting into the future. I'm always trying to get through this to the next thing, to the next thing. And, she was like, hey, like, I just want to be able to go for a walk with you for 30 minutes and enjoy the walk. Yeah. And I thought about it. I was like, wow, okay. Like, and I really enjoy doing those things with her when we do it. But I rob myself and us of the opportunity sometimes because I could be just worrying about the next thing. And okay, I'd love to do that walk with you, but I need to talk about this problem I'm trying to solve or this or that. And being able to, like, choose your battles of when you do and don't do things, allow yourself to be present in what you're doing is so important, and we need that. We burn it. I guess that's how you burn out.
Yeah, totally. No, those are all great points. I think it's interesting thinking about changes, and little things can go a really long way. And solving a problem, solving like an issue with mental health or behavioral health, making a change. Sometimes the change doesn't have to have anything to do with the problem. And so, like, I know one of the first young people who came on our expedition, so this was like 2013, we were running 2-week expeditions, and it was the first expedition we did, and he came on the program. We had a great time. It was really, like, lovely to meet him. I got called into his school like 2.5 weeks later, and he's the naughtiest kid and doesn't respect the teachers. And I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, I am such a failure. And like 2 weeks went by, he dropped out of school, and I went, oh great, I've remortgaged my home to start this nonprofit, and look at this, our first program, we're a total failure in the eyes of this school. And he said, I'm going to move to the snow and teach snowboarding. And I was like, kid, don't drop out of school, finish high school, seriously, like, it doesn't matter what comes next. And he said, no, I'm going. And he's now like one of the lead youth development for the Australian Olympic snowboarding team.
Wow.
Like, so he made a change, and it really worked out for him,
Yeah.
But all the adults, we were sitting here going, no way, don't do that, don't do anything. And I'm not advocating like everyone drop out of school, but sometimes we can limit the possibilities by thinking we know better, where he really just needed to get the hell out of high school.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And so he knew what he needed. And so it was a really well-informed decision, but I probably wasn't really listening to him that well. So I probably really needed to hear him out. And so there's other times when things like, we see pamphlets about cigarettes or drinking or drugs, and they don't usually really inspire people all that much to make a lifestyle change. But if they say something like, I need to be a better father, like that might have nothing to do with someone's drinking or substance use. It could be, okay, what does that look like? And then they're motivated to start heading somewhere instead of, I need to run away from this. It's like, we actually really need to know where we're going. Like, for instance, nobody gets in a taxi and says, take me anywhere but here. You
Yeah.
gotta know
Yeah.
what, I'll know I'm getting closer to this place that I want to be at. So sometimes we've overcomplicated the mental health world, where simple changes and little tiny things can be really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. The simplicity thing, like, and whoever said simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. I think it was like Einstein or someone, but what you're talking about there, it's so true. And, we need to learn to trust ourselves, because we can ask everyone around us. We could have the best mentors, coaches, whatever. We're probably going to still have the most clear answer ourselves if we can have the confidence, like that kid that wanted to go and become a snowboard ski instructor, whatever you had said it was. Trust in yourself, listen to that voice. And it might not be the most logical thing, but if we can really tap into that, then we can, make more informed decisions. And I think I love your point. I think it's so clear how you're saying, you get in a taxi if you don't know where to go. That's what a lot of us do when we're trying to avoid pain, avoid facing reality, avoid responsibility. It can be, I'm going to go back into this same behavior that really is just escapism without any actual plan. And then I'm just going to end up back in the same position. We need to really cut through all of that and work out, where do I want to go? That's your mission, your purpose. What is driving me? Because then you can deal with the discomfort of making that uncertain, taxi ride. So it's like, it's so important. So you were talking a lot about the outdoor expeditions, nature therapy, that side of it. Can you tell me, how important is that?
Well, in the scheme of things, somewhat important, but all the therapies, like when it comes to, if you're thinking of this like a psychotherapy or a mental health intervention, it's very random that a therapy comes into existence and then everyone goes, oh, that's not effective, we should not do this anymore. They all stick around. They're like glitter in a carpet. Once there's a new therapy, it's here for a long time. So the thing about the outdoors is that's just another place you can do this. So it shouldn't be viewed as other than things like that. But the outdoors, we know vitamin D, good for your immune system, good for a range of things. People tend to report feeling less stressed after going outside. There's some good things about getting outside. When you're watching a TV, and again, I'm not anti this, your brain does have to do something, like you're watching dialogue. Staring at a waterfall, your brain can just do nothing and still be in awe of something. That's nice for you. So the outdoors is it's a good kind of usually free way of helping yourself really quickly. So we encourage young people that if they have a space that they really like, whether it's a park, somewhere they can go for a short walk that's nearby. Obviously, this is hard in different settings, but like nearby nature is really good. Don't think of it, I have to go to Antarctica to find nature. If you can find the nearby places, that can be really rewarding. And if you attach meaning to this helps me feel better, you'll probably be more likely to do it. So, change that is rewarding is really nice. So there's so much research about the benefits of being outside and well-being. I come at it from that therapy view of, it's just another place I get to work. And so that's good for me. I don't try to overhype it too much.
And it just comes back to, doing the simple things that we know are good for us. So that's a really good point. So I've got these closing questions. Before I go into that, where can our listeners go if they want to buy the book or learn more about you?
So more about me, I'm on all the social media things. My name is pretty unique in Will Dobud, so if you search that, you'll probably find me anywhere. I'm a pretty open book, so if you want to reach out and say hi or say you're an idiot, that's okay too. I love meeting new people, like meeting you today, Nick. The book, kids these days, there's a ton of books that all have the same title. So we are the red one, right? And you can find that Amazon, many independent bookstores, as well. But Amazon, and then if you want access, if you do decide, any listener decides to buy the book, email me the receipt and I can give you access to. We have a range of resources for parents, for teachers, videos, parenting workbook that we used to use when working with kids. So tons of other stuff that you can have as well. So we're directing everybody to Amazon because that's the world we live in. The book's also available on Audible. Don't worry, I did not read it. A professional did. So yeah, that's a really affordable way to get it as well. So yeah, no, it's been a really exciting month since it's come out, and excited to hear feedback as people keep reading on. So yeah, kids these days, yeah. So it's been exciting, and being able to share ideas from it and talk about whatever comes up when we have a conversation is also super fun. So, but it's broad, and I think adults will hopefully find it useful in kind of reconceptualizing how we think about intervening with teenagers.
Yeah, well, super important the work you're doing, and like I said, I'll have to bring you back on here in the future because there's so many things to talk about. But please do make sure to go to the links, buy the book, check out the work, because it is so important what you're doing. So yeah, and I really appreciate you making the time to come on here and talk about it, share it with my listeners.
Yeah, absolutely.
So closing questions, first one, what do you think's currently the biggest burden on mental health in society?
Social connection and engagement. So I think that as a burden to society, or what's hurting people?
To society.
Okay, the biggest burden is engagement. So when we look at the leading cause of disability in the Western world is always anxiety and depression. So it gets people out of the workforce, and I'm not all for just making people work, obviously. But this is the language we've wrapped it up in. So if people don't feel like they have something to contribute, we're going to have issues with meaning making. So to reverse this, we need to think about a world worth participating in. How can people feel comfortable to go out of home, go talk to strangers, go meet new people, go out and feel like they're contributing something with their work as well? So the biggest burden is on that engagement. And so why do we all get glued to our phones? Well, it's engaging. So we need a more engaging social world all around us.
And what about on the individual level, just quickly, what would you say is the biggest one?
I think we see we know how protective social connection is, and feeling like you have people on your team, and feeling you have people to go to when things get tough. And so even like the quality of, how people report the quality of warmth and connection with their mother is predictive of like even how much money they make as an adult. So we see that we need far more warmth and connection, and that will actually, even though we think like resilience, just do hard shit, it's actually, no, you need more lighthouses around. You need to know, hey, I'm lost at sea, I know I can go talk to Nick. And so we want some more connection. So that, I think, is one of the leading things, that we're too busy, we're overworked, we're bringing our work home with our phones. We're also bringing home 7 billion people into our homes on social media, and we need to get local again and think about community. Where's our third space? Where are we going to be around people? And so in many ways, there's a lot of old ways that can be really helpful. And I don't mean that to sound like a hyper conservative. I mean that like there's been clues for a long time in how we've evolved as humans. So I think really don't take relationships as incidental.
Yeah, they really are, and like you said, it's not just about doing the hard shit. If we have that community around us, we're probably more likely to cope with doing the hard stuff because we know we've got the backbone. So it's okay. We can do it, and we're going to be okay either way. It's when we put that pressure, that existential situation of I'm not going to be okay if I don't get this. That's gonna kill you. So yeah, love that point.
Absolutely.
When would you say was the last time you were truly vulnerable?
Ooh. This is a good question. I'm like everyone. I like to think I'm pretty okay with being vulnerable. Um, hmm. I'm trying to think of a good example. I guess at home with family and having kids that are still home, it's whenever there's something that's not going well in the house, I always I can sometimes be like, this will just get better, and why is everyone worried about this, and it's okay, and I try to be really grounded in if kids are struggling or there's a bad breakup or they're getting ready for exams or something bad has happened at either of our work. I try to stay really grounded. And then at sometimes you just have to say, guys, I really need a break here, and I'm at the end of my rope, and can we come together and have dinner together, and like just putting yourself out there that, hey, I'm struggling here. And so I think, and for the most part, like I'm always impressed with kids. They'll step up to the plate. You know,
That's
like
beautiful.
we lost my wife's mother like figure just the other month, and so she was saying, guys, I really need you to step up here. And then I'm holding that space. I'm also sad about losing this important person. I'm also trying to hold space in the house. And then you just need to say, guys, we need to be a team here, and we need to come together because I'm at the end of my rope here. So I think putting yourself out there, most people will step up to the plate. And
It's
I
a
don't think
beautiful
that means
example.
going out and being a bleeding heart about everything, but I do think
Yeah.
most people will step up to the plate.
Yeah. And sorry to hear, about that as well,
Yeah.
your loss recently. But I think it's a really beautiful example what you're saying there, because like you're saying, I don't think we give kids enough credit for how much, how responsive they can be to certain things. And it's probably the best teaching you can give them, to show them, hey, I'm human like you guys. I have my own struggles too. Often as parents, we feel like we can't show them that. We bottle everything up. That comes
Yeah.
out in frustration and anger. And then that models how the kids are going to behave in the future and how they're going to deal with stress. The best thing we can actually show them is, it's okay. I'm struggling. I can't get everything right. You're going to be
Mm.
okay too if you struggle. It's okay. I think it's
Yeah.
such a good point.
And like when kids come home from school or from work, whatever they're doing, you know, we all get into this. How was your day? It was fine. Isn't it? Like
Mm.
sometimes I'll just start unloading on them. I'll go, you won't believe what this jerk researcher said about me, and then I'm going because I want to hear about your day. So I'll unload, then you can have a vent to me about what was shitty in your day. And so
Mm.
we need to give kids things to imitate. That's probably one of my
That's
biggest
nice.
takeaways of writing this book. Like, if we want kids off the phones, we got to get off the phones. If we want kids to know how to play outdoors, we got to show them how to play outdoors. We
I've got to
we
lead the
can't
way.
just delete
Yeah.
the phone and then all of a sudden they're going out and going hiking for 30. Come on. It's not going to happen. So we got
It
to
won't
show
work.
them the things we want them to do. So even at the dinner table, unpack your disagreements. I wrote about this in chapter 4 of the book, that I had a friend come from the States. He had just finished his second tour in Iraq like over 10 years ago. And he came and stayed with us and worked with me in the outdoors. He's one of my oldest friends. Like, there's pictures of us as babies together. And we sat down. Now, his view of gun ownership differs from mine in a very large way. And there was one night we got into it. And it was mostly Renee and my friend getting into it. And it was a back and forth. And at times it was like, geez, they're going to kill
Mm.
each other. Look at this. And then it was like, he got up, took all the dishes to the sink, and we were like, what movie are we watching tonight? And the kids, when they got in bed, said, I've never seen two adults argue like that and then just like pour someone another drink and get on with life. And like,
Yeah.
you know, and so it was like, it wasn't mean spirited. It was an actual how to disagree with someone at the dinner table. It was fantastic. They still talk about it 10 or so years later. So I
So
think we can
important.
keep thinking about what we give them to imitate.
Yeah. Otherwise, you just become a people pleaser. For me, that's been the biggest thing to undo. Feeling like I'm going to Yeah, like feeling like there's going to be all of these repercussions if you be honest and integral in your point of view, whereas actually what normally happens, people respect you more, you build a deeper relationship. It might feel a bit uncomfortable, but there's gonna be more depth if you can do that. So great lesson.
Totally.
If you could go back and give one piece of advice to your 18-year-old self, what would that be?
Hmm. I think enjoy the ride, and it's just an adventure, and adventures have ups and downs, and things are for the most part really good. And don't like sort of like don't sweat the small stuff. Like good things are coming, um, and keep grinding and keep working and keep doing your stuff, and everything's okay. And um, yeah, just to keep going, and that this is an adventure, and there'll be highs and lows, and that's cool.
Great advice. I love that. Two more.
Hmm.
What is, if there are any, your biggest regret in life? Maybe you don't have any, but just, putting
No,
that one out there.
no. I think sometimes um, I'm probably a weirdo about this one, but like I think when my father left the family, there were and he had his own serious trauma and alcohol related issues that took his life when he was too young. And I think when I was younger, and this is something I think therapy was not helpful for when I was a kid, was everyone was harping on how awful he was, how bad it was that he was not being a father. And I look back like my love for the outdoors, like he took me fishing as a kid. I was a good enough athlete as a kid because he played games with me all the time. And so sometimes while he was alive, I don't think I had a very balanced perspective. And if I had a more balanced perspective, I could have, as a young adult, probably put in some quality time at the end of his life where I just went, fuck it. Who cares? So it's not really a regret. More, it's like a life lesson about, you know, there can be someone who's really struggling, and that's one side of the story, and that, he's avoiding all emotional anything. And there's also the side of the story that I bet you I could have brought some relief to him, even though it's not my responsibility as a kid. But as a
Mm,
young adult, I probably could have put more effort into just staying connected. And what how would that have changed the end of his life? Who the hell knows? But I think that would be one where I've sort of with our family said, hold on a second. Like, yes, he abandoned us and didn't pay child support and did all these awful things.
mm.
But when he was around, did we notice some of the good things he was doing? Or are we only looking at the bad side of the story? And so I think that changes our view on people.
Great example. And I think for everyone to learn, we don't have to look at things purely as regret, but what can we take? If we can learn from it and then implement that into our future choices, it becomes a lesson rather than a regret or a failure. So I think
Yeah.
it's how we should look at things. So final one,
Hmm.
what would you say it means to be truly happy in life?
Um, I think having a purpose, having a play, knowing that I can take risks on things, and knowing that if I fall on my face, that's okay. Um, I mean, I think happiness is also like little. What does Nevin, my co-author, call this? Like little victories, like
Hmm.
noticing the little things that are going well. Um, I also think l- happiness is learning new things, whether that's like during COVID when we all became sourdough bakers, or little things like I like learning new things that are outside of my academic world or therapy world, and being fortunate to do that. I said this to a friend earlier this year, like no matter what this book sells, doesn't sell, like we got good endorsements from Bruce Perry, and wild cards like Paris Hilton, like all that's really great. At the same time, whether it does anything, I feel very happy that I got to write it. Like I got to take what was inside of me and pour it out, meet new people, talk to experts, like the whole thing. Like I said, the journey and being engaged in the journey, I think, is the best part. Where if I'm waiting for, why is this not a bestseller yet, I'm going to be a miserable asshole, you know? So that's, it'll open doors no matter what. And so I think happiness is like the purpose and sense of I'm doing something that I know that I'm good at is the wrong term, but like I get to do what I want to do. And that makes me really happy, being surrounded with people that like to do it and meeting new people with common interests like yourself. Like how fortunate, I mean, it's 12 o'clock on a Monday and here we've had this hour and a half conversation. I'm going, this is a wicked Monday,
100%.
It's great.
100%. I love that. And I totally agree. Like I said at the beginning, what is it here? It's like 8:30 at night. I'm jet lagged, but I was at the beginning, I was thinking, how am I going to get through this? I feel better than, better than I did before because I get so charged by being able to have these conversations. It's such a gift to be able to do, and whenever you stay tapped into that, life opens up. It's when you look for the results that you close yourself off.
Yes. And you never know, like this is just good experiential philosophy. You never know what what will come up. I had no idea I'd be talking about regrets or whatever, it's fantastic. You never know where it's going to go. And that's like, as a researcher, when people say, oh, how did you write a book? I go, well, Nevin and I just had a Zoom once a week and we talked about something and went, shit, that should go in the book. We spoke to experts and we were like, what does this person think about teaching social emotional learning in school? I've never thought about it. Now I better learn about it. And so
Totally.
it opens up pathways where you go, I didn't think about that way. That's cool.
Totally.
Toxins.
And yeah, I was listening.
Like, what the hell do I care about toxins? And then you talk to an environmental toxins researcher, you go, holy shit, this is a much bigger problem than social media. And you go, but now I have everything I learned about toxins I can apply to other areas of my life. Like we say, I was well versed in the anonymous meetings as a younger person, and you don't want to be a dry drunk, right? And so they talk about this language, right? And I'm not interested in the labeling language, but each their own. And in toxins research, they talk about regrettable substitutions, and I was just like, so like you've solved the issue, but what'd you fill it in with? So like flame retardants. Everyone was falling asleep, smoking, burning their house down and dying. So they put this chemical in furniture to stop that happening, which was full of toxic chemicals that led to birth defects, higher rates of cancer. So you fixed one thing and fucked up another. So you think about regrettable substitutions. And I went, I can apply this to my life in so many other areas where what's the regrettable substitution? So learning those things and then going, how can I apply this? I think is amazing.
It's so good. And final thing on that. I was listening to a podcast the other day where he was talking about we're all listening to people who have excelled at whatever their field is, so you're wanting to write a book. Okay, if I want to do the perfect book, I'm going to go and listen. I'm going to go and look at what this best-selling author is doing. And I'm going to model my behavior right now off what they're doing while they're already got to the pinnacle. But we're not looking at what did they actually do when they were at point zero to get there. It's going to be messy. It's going to be work, like you're saying, you work it out as you go. And that's where the discoveries happen. We try and over-engineer it, perfect it, look at what these people are doing now, but that's not applicable. We got to look at, it doesn't have to be the perfect process. Just do it. Get momentum. Try things. That's where you discover things. That's actually the joy in it.
Absolutely. And like I'll tell you, when Nevin sat down with this toxins researcher, I was like, Nevin, now we've written a book that's like verging on politics and it's too complicated and it's going to scare the shit out of parents. And I said, let's just bury that chapter at the end of the book. And then it just crept up and up. because the lessons were so important for setting up how we talk about mental health. How do we talk about the phones? How do we talk about these things? So it crept up and up, where it was like I learned so much about, interference, collusion, corporate interest, all these things that are so scary, but also that it kind of means we don't need to wait around for other people to solve this. And so it was inspiring to talk to someone that was like, has actually, like, how hard was it to get lead out of gasoline? How hard is it to get organizations to stop using these harmful pesticides and all these agricultural chemicals? And how do we, but I watched this career, and this guy has win after win after win, and everything's still bad, and he keeps going. He gets kicked off of advisory panels because he's like, hey, we need to actually follow this out. But he somehow can maintain hope up against like big money, big government, big money. And I'm sitting here going, that's an encouraging person that I met.
Yeah.
I want some of that tenacity. And so meeting people like that and really thinking, what's the quality that got them here, I think is amazing.
Such a lesson in all of that for all of us, just the tenacity, keep going, find what your mission is, and love what you're doing, mate. So thank you so much for making the time.
We went a long time, but it was so fun. It flew by for me, and it was really nice to meet you. Thank you for putting out the time, and it's really awesome to meet you.
And thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode and any topics you'd like to hear about. Feel free to leave a comment or send me a DM. Your feedback is always appreciated. It would mean the world to me if you can subscribe to my channel, leave a like or comment, share it with your friends. It makes a world of difference. It doesn't cost anything, and it helps me to get this show bigger and better and bring on the guests and the production value that you ask for every single week. I couldn't do it without you guys. Thank you so much.